So here's your thoracic vertebrae, here's your spinous process here, transverse process here, and facet for the tubercle of the rib, and demifacet for another articulation with the rib, and then your superior articular facets, which articulate with the vertebrae above this vertebrae. So that superior articular facet will articulate with the inferior articular facet of the vertebra above it. Next slide. So here's a picture of an actual photograph of an actual vertebra, transverse process, there, here, spinous process, the vertebral foramen body, superior articular facet here, and superior demifacet, and a facet for the tubercle of the rib on both sides here. Next slide. Here's the spinous showing the lateral view, showing the thoracic vertebrae. So his spinous process extends and slants inferiorly. Here's your superior demifacet and inferior demifacet. So a rib will come in and hit. It'll come in and come across here, and it'll hit both of the facets. It'll hit this facet, this one, and the vertebrae above it will have a little facet down here. So the rib hits that facet as well. So that's the inferior demifacet of the vertebrae above this vertebrae. Next slide. And that's just a slide showing the superior and inferior demifacets, superior articular facets, facet for the tubercle rib. So the rib comes in, touches there, and the spinous process slanted inferiorly. Next slide. Just a old picture drawing. They used to draw all these things before they had really good photography. So we got some really cool old drawings out there. They're pretty detailed. Next slide. Here's a lumbar vertebrae. You can notice that the body is much more prominent. You still have a vertebral foramen because you still got spinal cord going through there. But it stops being spinal cord. It starts being actually individual fibers going down there. So it doesn't have to be quite as large. But you still have all the nerves going down that are going to innervate your legs. So you have to send those all the way down to the bottom of the spinal, to the vertebral column. Transverse process here. Notice that the superior articular processes are more aspect is more posterior, and you have the spinous process is here. And we're going to look at the side, a lateral view of that here in a second. Next slide. So here's why we say it's a hatchet-shaped spinous process. So from above, on that previous slide, you can see it was thin. It looked like this, but on the when you look at it from the side, you realize it's actually kind of this rectangular shaped. So it's a hatchet-shaped spinous process. Next slide. So here's just a summary of the human spine: the cervical region, thoracic region, lumbar region, sacral region, and coccyx or coccygeal, which is coccygeal region. The bone is called coccyx. This is called the sacrum or the sacral region. So this would be the lumbar region, the lumbar region, thoracic region, and cervical region. So you can refer to it as the sacrum or the sacral region. You can refer to this as the coccyx or the coccygeal region. Next slide. So here's a view of how these vertebrae stick together. Here's a body and another body, and you have a disc between the two of them. You have a foramen, so you have the nerves coming out of the spinal cord that come out through the foramen, out through this intervertebral foramen, and go wherever they're going to go. We'll talk about nerves here in a couple lectures, two or three, well, no, 3 or 4 weeks. Anyway, so we have the annulus fibrosus, the outside of it, and the nucleus pulposus is the inside of it, inside of the disc, of the intervertebral disc. And you can also see that we have the superior articular process here is articulating with an inferior articular process of the vertebrae above it. Next slide. So here's what happens if you have a herniation of a disc. So you have the nucleus pulposus leaks out, it's pressing on this spinal nerve, and that's causing some pain. So what you can do is take a little bit of this lamina out, and that will relieve some pressure, and so the spinal cord can then go back this way, and the nerve can go back this way a little bit, and maybe relieve a little bit of pressure off of that spinal nerve that's being squished. Next slide. So here's the sacrum and coccyx. So here's your superior articular process here, and let's see. Here's the base of the sacrum here, and then you have the ala, the wing, and then you have an auricular surface here, and it also shows it over here, and that articulates with the iliac bone to form the sacroiliac joint. Did I misspell that earlier? I think I may have. I can't remember how I spelled it earlier. There's the ileum that's part of the digestive system. There's the ileum that's part of the pelvis, the bone. So anyway, they're spelled differently. So one's I-L-E-U-M and those I-L. Anyway, I'll go back and look at that here in a second. So I'll correct it online too. Anyway, there are foramen, these little holes, and we have nerves exiting because you still have nerves coming down through here, and so they exit out through here to go down to the legs and other places. And they also come out of the sacral hiatus. There's a sacral canal here, and the sacral hiatus, and so what's left of the spinal cord it's actually nerve fibers coming down, and some of them come out of here as well. So, and you have your coccyx, which is projecting anteriorly, and so you can see it's projecting forward like that. So, and so you have 5 vertebrae: S1, S2, S3, S4, S1, S2, S3, S4, S5. So, and between each one, you have an intervertebral foramen here, here, and here. So that's 4 holes between 5 vertebrae. Next slide. So here's actual bones showing the same thing. Here's the base, the LA, the sacral promontory, the sacral foramen, the coccyx, sacral hiatus, auricular surface, superior articular facet where the L5, the 5th lumbar vertebrae, sits on top of the sacrum and articulates with it there. So, and the sacral canal that goes right down the middle of this and allowing the last of the nerve fibers to come on out. Next slide. So there's also abnormal vertebral curvature. There's three main types: scoliosis here, where it's crooked, goes to the side; kyphosis, so you have a hunchback. So a hunchback of Notre Dame had kyphosis. And there's something called lordosis, where the lumbar region is sticking out. And that's very commonly found in pregnant women. So it's lordosis. So it's named because the Lord would strut around with his stomach all puffed out because he had plenty to eat and he was nice and fat. So he was the Lord of the manor. So it's lordosis. So, next slide. Male and female pelvis, you don't have to know this for the test. The iliac bones are more flared. They're flared out, and so women have hips and men don't. Is basically the way it's usually described. There's also the pelvic brim is a little bit larger. It makes a larger opening than it does in men to allow the baby to be born. The pubic symphysis, there's a wider pubic arch in women than there is in men. And let's see, the ilium in men projects more superiorly than the in women, which flares out and projects a little bit more laterally. And the bones in the female are a little bit lighter as well. So, so anyway, you don't have to know all that stuff, but it's just interesting to know how you can tell if you ran across a set of bones. If you were doing, say, anthropology, how you could tell female from male. That would be one way you could tell. Next slide. So, okay, thoracic cage, the rib cage, is composed of the ribs and the sternum, as well as costal cartilages, as well, and the thoracic vertebrae are part of the thoracic cage, or the rib cage. The sternum is actually composed of 3 fused bones. The top one is called the manubrium, has what's called the suprasternal or jugular notch. So if you reach up and you touch that soft spot right above the bony part of what you refer to as your chest bone, and there's a soft spot, there's a little divot right there. That's the top of the manubrium, and that's the suprasternal or jugular notch. Then if you feel down the sternum, you'll feel the body, and then the very bottom or inferior part is the xiphoid process. It's a little tiny bone that sticks down there. Those 3 bones are fused. The manubrium, where the manubrium and the body come together, it actually kind of juts out a little bit, and that is a anatomical landmark for you. That's where it's called the sternal angle, and that's where the second rib joins with the sternum. And the manubrium and the body both articulate with costal cartilages. Costal meaning rib, the rib cartilages. And I'll show you a little video after this and show you what those look like on the skeleton here in the lab. So, next slide. So you have 12 pairs of ribs. 1 through 7 are true ribs. Those 7 pairs are attached to the sternum. 8 through 12 are false ribs. There are 5 ribs that do not directly attach to the sternum. If I can say the word right. Ribs 8 through 12 are called vertebrochondral ribs. They attach to costal cartilages of rib number 7. So they don't directly attach to the sternum. Those ribs attach to the cartilage of rib 7. 11 and 12 are floating ribs, or also called vertebral ribs, since they do not attach to the sternum or any cartilages. The space between the ribs is called the intercostal space. The first intercostal space is between the first and second ribs. The second intercostal space is between the second and third ribs, etc. In the ribs, there's a posterior projection. The facets articulate with demifacets of the vertebrae. The neck is a constriction that's lateral to the head. A tubercle articulates with the facet of the transverse process, and the body is the main part of the rib. And I'm going to show you these things in a little video also. So, next slide. So here we go. Here's the sternum. We'll start with sternum. So here's the manubrium here, and there's the joining with the body of the sternum, which is here and goes all the way down to there. And then here's the xiphoid process down here. So there's 3 bones that make up the sternum. So up here would be your suprasternal notch, and you notice also that the collarbones come in and they touch the manubrium also there. So the clavicles come in there. These things right here, these parts right here is actually cartilage, and so and over here is bone. So that's rib bone, and there's some hyaline cartilage here and here and here and here and here and here. So ribs 1 through 7 are the true ribs. The 8, 9, and 10 down here are part of the false ribs, and then 11 and 12 over here are called floating ribs. There. Next slide. And one other thing to point out. Let's see. So you have 12 ribs, and so how many thoracic vertebrae do you have? Yep, you have 12 thoracic vertebrae. So the ribs only attach to the thoracic vertebrae. They do not attach to the cervical vertebrae, nor do they attach to the lumbar. They attach to the thoracic vertebrae. So yeah, it's basically a one-to-one arrangement. This is just to show you the suprasternal notch here, and also just to show you the ligaments that attach the collarbone to the manubrium here. So you have, and here's the cartilage of rib number 1. So you have a lot of ligaments that are attaching all these bones together. Then you have the manubrium of the sternum, and this right here is the attachment site for the second rib. And this part right here, where it kind of juts out, and you can feel it right there. That shows you that's where the rib number 2 comes in. That's called the sternal angle. Next slide. So here's how a rib articulates with a vertebra. You have the superior facets and inferior facets. They articulate with the superior, or they articulate with the inferior demifacet of a vertebra, and this articulates with a superior demifacet of a thoracic vertebra. Then the articular facet on the tubercle of the rib articulates with the facet on the transverse process of the thoracic vertebra. This is the articular facet is on the tubercle. So the tubercle is a little projection on the rib. This part's the neck, and this part's the head. And this end over here is where the costal cartilage attaches down here, and that's a facet down there that attaches to the costal cartilage. Next slide. So here's how it fits together. You have the head of the rib, you have the articular part of the tubercle, and the tubercle of the rib. And here's a facet. Number 1 is the facet for the articular part of the tubercle of the rib. So a rib comes in and touches this vertebra. There'll be another vertebra on top of this one, and so the head of the rib has 2 facets on it, and so the superior facet of the head of the rib would touch the inferior demifacet of a vertebrae, and the inferior articular facet of the head of the rib would articulate with the superior demifacet of the thoracic vertebra. Next slide. Okay, this shows a little bit better. So you have an articulation here with the tubercle. So here's your articulation of the rib with the tubercle of the rib with the transverse process of the thoracic vertebrae. So here's the rib coming around this way, and then it comes in and it articulates with a inferior demifacet here and a superior demifacet down here underneath that you can't see underneath the head of the rib there. So there's 2 articulations, one vertebra here and the vertebra below it. So it actually has like the disc is actually right in the middle. So the rib kind of fits on either above and below the intervertebral disc there. Next slide. So, and the reason that you are interested in where that sternal angle is and the second rib is that you can use that as a landmark and find where to put your stethoscope. So if you find that second rib, you can look and you can find an aortic area, a pulmonic area, and then you can also look for the mitral valve as well as tricuspid valve and find all those if you look in the second and fourth intercostal spaces. Next slide. So, and last slide is this is CT scan of the skull. I just wanted to show you this. Here's the occipital condyles that you can see there, and the dens right in the middle that shows you. So you can see the C1, the occipital condyles, and so it's C1 and C2 vertebrae that you can see part of the C2 vertebrae, the dens of the C2 vertebrae. You can see that there in this CT scan. I just thought it was interesting to show you so you could see this stuff and see what it looks like. And this would be obviously at the top of the slide there is the nasal region. And then you can see the ears sticking off here on the sides. So, and next slide, I think that's it.